Welcome to Kabbalah Cafe. This is a special Chanukah edition, and today's class has a very special dedication. And I want to, first of all, acknowledge the dedication and of course, mention the specific honor that it is for. So, number one, thank you to Dr. Joy Maxey for sponsoring today's session of Kabbalah Cafe. In loving memory of her dear friend Jerry Shana Devora Rosenblum Carr, whose yahrzeit is the 30th day of Kislev, which is coming, well, this year is, there's no 30th of Kislev. Some years there is, some years there isn't, but it is this week, one way or another. And indeed, may her memory, Dr. Jerry Rosenblum Carr, may her memory be for a blessing, and may she advocate on high for only blessings for her loved ones and her dear friend, of course, Dr. Maxey below. And indeed, soon may we be reunited with all of our loved ones who we loved and lost, and with the coming of Mashiach, may be speed in our days, and let us say Amen.
Amen.
So we're going to just to be clear, I wrote a special Chanukah edition. We are going to still be studying our text, but I want to connect it with Chanukah because, of course, that is the holiday that we're celebrating, and that's I think on everyone's minds, and it is a very timely conversation. So we find something very unique about Chanukah. And what we find about Chanukah that's unique is that there is a major piece of the holiday or of the historical events that doesn't seem to get a lot of airtime. And what I'm referring to is the military victory. Now, if you think about it, think about what's going on in Israel right now, and imagine if Israel is able to, not imagine, right? Please God, Israel will defeat terrorism and do what it needs to do. But imagine if after all of that is gone, right? After all terrorism and Hamas, after all of that is gone, imagine if, the Israelis, right, or the soldiers, whatever, imagine if they would come back to, I'm trying to think of a scenario that would parallel. They came back to Israel and they were having, let's say, a party in a certain venue. And for whatever reason, the lights were out and there was no power, but somehow they were able to get power to the building and miraculously the lights went on. And imagine if the entire scope of that experience was focused on the miracle of the light. It would seem profoundly bizarre. Why are we celebrating the miracle of the light? It's the military victory. That was the ikar. How do you translate ikar? The primary thing. It's like we're making the tafel ikar and the ikar tafel. We're making the primary secondary and the secondary primary. Everyone knows. You ask little kids even. You ask a child or an adult, why do we celebrate Chanukah? And inevitably they'll say, oh, because when they were trying to light the menorah and they only had one flask of oil that would last for one day, it lasted for 8 days. And so that's it. What about the Greeks? I guess we talk about it also, but where's the commemoration? What are we doing for that? And I'll tell you, it filters down into halacha, into practical Jewish law. I'll ask you a question. Is there a mitzvah? It's not a trick question. It's a straight up halacha question. Is there a mitzvah to have a su'udah, a feast on Chanukah? I'm not asking, do we go to Chanukah parties? I'm not asking, do we or do we not gorge on, oily stuff, latkes, and I'm not asking that. What I'm asking is it a mitzvah to have a sit-down, a su'udah, a meal on Chanukah? The answer is no. You know when it is a mitzvah? Every other holiday. It's a mitzvah on Rosh Hashanah. Okay, sorry, not Yom Kippur, but there's a mitzvah. Huh? Good. So Eva's saying that maybe it's because it's a rabbinic holiday. Oh, the counter argument is Purim. Purim is a rabbinic holiday, and yet we know on Purim. No, this is a good dialogue. This is like a perfect halachic dialogue. So one thought would be, well, it's rabbinic, but the counter argument is, well, Purim. You have 4 mitzvahs on Purim. Mikra Megillah, right? To hear the Megillah twice. We have gifts to the poor, gifts of food to each other, and number 4 is a su'udat mitzvah, a meal, a feast. It's a mitzvah. It's called a su'udas mitzvah, a mitzvah feast. And yet, on Chanukah, we don't find such a mitzvah. Now, I need to break this down. So there's a lot of questions. Question is, why not? I asked the question before, just so we're all keeping score here of the questions. They're all related. Trust me. First question I asked is, where's the military victory? Why are we not why is there no mention? What's going on with that? Question number one. Question number two, where's the feast? Like that old Wendy's commercial. Where's the beef? Right? Where's the beef? Right? Wendy's. Who would have thought? A nice Jewish girl. So you have these two questions. Let's go further. The Rambam, Maimonides, writes that it is a mitzvah to have a Suda, to have a feast on Chanukah. And yet, most of the poskim, most of the halachic authorities, including the final decision in the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, side against Maimonides. And the question is, what is going on? Why does Rambam say that you should have a feast, that it is a mitzvah to have a festive meal on Chanukah? It's not just a good thing to do, but an actual obligation. Whereas the majority of the poskim, the Rush, the Rif, others, great contemporaries of Rambam and great halachic authorities, they do not believe that that is the case, and indeed that's the final halach. So in order to break this down, I want to share with you a piece of the Talmud, of Gemara. And yes, we will get back to Kabbalah very soon, but we're starting off with the Gemara, with the Talmud. So let's pass this around. Take one down, pass it around.
I would have thought because it's so many things we're going to strain on.
So one answer could be, or an observation is, well, one second. If it is a mitzvah, if it is, a mitzvah to have a sudas mitzvah, to have a feast, so then when would you do it? Which day, one day, all days? That's a good question. We don't have to worry about that because we don't have to. So, but the question is, why not? By the way, sudas mitzvah is not only limited to holidays. Any time there's a mitzvah that includes the obligation of simcha, this is very important what I'm about to say. Anytime you have a mitzvah that includes the obligation to have simcha, simcha is defined in halacha as basar v'yayin, as meat and wine. You don't have to have meat, but it's better to have meat if you're a meat eater or whatever. So meat and wine is the definition of simcha in Judaism. What a great religion we have, right? Isn't that great? The definition of joy, how to experience joy, right, is about food and beverage. It's amazing, right? But here's the point. You have this also by a simcha, by a wedding, the feast, right? It's called reception, yeah. The feast after the what's it called again? After the ceremony is a mitzvah. It's a sudat mitzvah. It's a mitzvah feast. It's not just a feast. It's a mitzvah feast. By a brit milah, by circumcision. It's a sudat mitzvah. It's a mitzvah to eat. It's not just nice, not just good to have a spread. It's a mitzvah. By the way, that's why some people, even in an early morning bris, right, brit milah, circumcision, will serve fleishiks, meat. Why? Because it's a sudat mitzvah, and simcha and sudat mitzvah is defined as, ideally, as meat and wine. So look, I've been to morning, bris, and they have fleishiks on the menu. I'm not going to tell you what I did for my kids. I don't know. I don't remember if we did that. We may have just gone for the cream cheese schmear. But there's a thing. Some people do it.
I remember seeing this.
Yeah. It's a little bit. Yeah, it's usually in the morning. It's a little bit. Not everyone is going to go for it. So anyway, let's study some Talmud together, and I think we're going to get some clues. All right, I know we're going to get some clues from this. Here we go. So the Gemara asks, let me put this up on the board, on the screen. 1 second. Hold on. Stay with me. Here we go. Okay. Thumbs up if you can see it. You got it? You guys see it? Yes? All right. Thank you. My Chanukah. Okay. So a quick word of clarification. There is no tractate for Chanukah in the Talmud. Every other holiday, including Purim, has a tractate. Rosh Hashanah is Rosh Hashanah. Yoma is for Yom Kippur. Sukkah is for Sukkot. Megillah is for Purim. Pesachim is for Pesach. Shavuot, there is no Masechta either, but the whole thing is Torah. And they're not going to call something Maseches cheesecake. So that's out. Yes.
Maccabees added the Torah.
Good. That's a good question. That's a good question also. Good. Okay, we're gonna get to all this stuff. All right, Gemara. Here we go. The Talmud asked the question, "My Chanukah, what is Chanukah?" I can read it on the screen. What is Chanukah? Now, the Talmudic question is vague. It literally says, "My Chanukah." What is Chanukah? Now, look, lots of Jews are lawyers and Jews love breaking down things. It's part of our culture. So when you ask a question, what is Chanukah? One could ask on the question, what do you mean? What is Chanukah? What is Chanukah? What's your question? So now you have commentaries analyzing the opening two words of the Gemara of the Talmud, my Chanukah. Oh, I forgot to mention, there's no tractate for Chanukah, but it is included in the conversation on Shabbat, tractate Shabbat, which deals with lighting Shabbat candles. So there's a segue into Chanukah. Fine. So let's go into this. Tractate. Oh, it's like a book, a volume.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know why. Yeah, it's not. It's like filling our phylacteries. Who uses that either? I don't know. It's a book that is organized by subject. Okay. So now, the Gemara asked the question. The Talmud asked the question. What is Chanukah? Now in brackets, I have one angle on the question, i.e., why are lights kindled on Chanukah? Truth is, Rashi in his commentary on the Talmud has a bit of a different angle. Rashi says the question, what does Chanukah means? Why did they establish the holiday? Not why do we light candles, but why was the entire holiday established? Okay. Let's continue. The sages taught, Megillah Tainit, the 25th of Kislev, the days of Chanukah are 8. One may not eulogize on them, and one may not fast on them. So again, 25th of Kislev begins an 8-day holiday. No eulogies, no fasting. In other words, it is a holiday. But what's the reason? You don't eulogize until after the holiday, right? Oh, then you told me you were at the. No, but even last week they had a shloshim, right? Didn't you tell me that in the JCC?
They did it the day before, not on the shloshim.
Yeah, for Rose Lubin, for Rose Lubin, they did the shloshim community wide on last Wednesday night. On the 29th, they didn't do it on the shloshim. They did it a day before because once you hit shloshim, it would be Chanukah, and then you can't eulogize for 8 days. So they did it before as opposed to pushing it up. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so we don't eulogize on them and we don't fast on them. What is the reason? So here we go. The Gemara continues. Here we go. We all know this story, but it's important to read this. And I'll tell you why. When the Greeks entered the sanctuary, they defiled all the oils that were in the sanctuary by touching them. Okay? Yeah. And when the Hasmonean monarchy overcame them and emerged victorious over, I think by touching them is a commentary. I don't think that is I don't think that's. Okay. And when the Hasmonean monarchy overcame them, good morning, and emerged victorious over them, they searched and found only one cruse of oil that was placed with the seal of the high priest, undisturbed by the Greeks. There was sufficient oil there to light the candelabrum, the menorah. For only one day, a miracle occurred, and they lit the candelabrum from it 8 days. Right? So my joke is, it's not my joke. I've seen the meme. It's like, imagine you have a cell phone with 10% battery as you start the day, and it lasts the whole day. It's unbelievable. It's a miracle. Right? A little bit of oil lasted for 8 days. The next year, the sages instituted those days and made them holidays with recitation of Hallel and special thanksgiving and prayer and blessings. Look at that last paragraph and tell me what you don't see. Again, I'm going to read it again. It's easy to gloss over the last paragraph. Oh, it's just kind of concluding it. It's like, blah, 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 holiday. Look carefully at what it says. The next year, the sages instituted those days and made them holidays with What? Recitation of Hallel. That's the prayer that we had in the prayer service. Thanksgiving and special Thanksgiving in prayer and blessings. What does it not say? Doesn't refer to it as simcha. Simcha, it doesn't say you may simcha umishta, like it says umishta, like it says by Purim, days of joy and feasting. It doesn't say that. It says halal and hoda'ah. Halal and hoda'ah. Thanksgiving or halal and thanksgiving. That's what it says. Which means that according to the Talmud, again, according to most commentaries, the Talmud is specifying that the holiday of Chanukah is a, how would we frame it? Spiritual holiday. I don't know if we would call it spiritual, a prayerful Thanksgiving holiday, etc. But it does not refer to it as a time for simcha and feast, the joy and feasting. It does not say that. Therefore, the vast majority of the main three pillars of halacha. Look, Jewish law that we have today is the product of a lot of dialogue and a lot of debate and ultimately reconciliation of different opinions. Typically, we go by three major halachic opinions. The Torah, the Rif, and the Rambam. And 2 out of 3 say, sounds like an ad for toothpaste. 2 out of 3 doctors, 2 out of 3 dentists. So 2 out of 3 of these halachic authorities say that there is no, since the Talmud doesn't mention simcha and mishta, joy and feasting, therefore there is no obligation to have a feast. Now, we're certainly joyous, but there's no mitzvah to have a feast. Again, we do it anyway, but it's not an obligation. Now, Maimonides says, Rambam says that it is a mitzvah to have a suda, a feast. So how does he explain the Gemara? The Talmud leaves it out. So how does he explain it? I'll share with you an insight. One angle on Maimonides' opinion is that the Talmud is not limiting Chanukah to this. The Talmud is telling us, in addition to the obvious, here's another angle on Chanukah, which answers our first question. And right now, what I'm saying is completely unclear. So let me break this down. We have 2 aspects of Chanukah. One is the military victory, and one is the miracle of the oil and the menorah, the lights. So we'll call it war and lights. We'll be very minimalistic here. War and lights. As I started off today's session, you would think, what should get the biggest play? The war. That was the whole thing, right? What was the history? The Syrian Greeks, known in Hebrew as the Yevanim, they came into Judea, they came into Israel. They were not happy with these people, i.e. the Jewish people, having other observances and pledging their allegiance to God as opposed to reason and other things and Hellenistic society. The Jews repelled them a little bit. Then they enacted decrees against Judaism, including no circumcision, no Jewish calendar, prohibitions against kosher. They came in ultimately and offered a pig on the altar, which you can imagine is a pretty big deal, right? And all sorts of things. They were attacking Judaism as a religion, the Jewish way of life. And the Hashmonaim, the Maccabees, they fought back. And it took a while, and there were many different battles and guerrilla warfare, etc. But ultimately, they repelled the Syrian Greeks and were able to reclaim the Beis Hamikdash, Jerusalem, the Temple, Jerusalem, etc. And that was, of course, a major deal. That's what we call the war. And then, as I said before, then you have the miracle with the lights. It's like, we need to, now we have the temple, so part of the service is lighting the menorah. There's not enough oil. We only found one flask, but it lasted for 8 days. That's also amazing. Again, that seems completely secondary to the primary. We got back the temple. We regained sovereignty over the holy city of Jerusalem. We repelled the Syrian Greek forces. That was the major deal. And yet, what do we celebrate? The oil. Therefore, Maimonides has a completely different understanding of Chanukah. Maimonides says, right? The Chanukah is not about exclusively the oil. He says Chanukah is about the military victory. Why is it that we also light candles on Chanukah? It's because of the oil. Which means when the Talmud says at the end that the sages established the holiday for Hallel and Hodah for Hallel and Thanksgiving, he's saying he understands the Talmud to be in addition to the obvious, they also establish it as a spiritual observance. How do you commemorate a physical victory, a physical war victory? By eating physical food, right? Like the famous joke, or I don't know, the statement. They try to kill us, we won. Let's eat, right? That's how it works. So for the military victory, so we have a Suda, we have a feast. For the lights, we have a spiritual Thanksgiving, and we have Hallel. We recite Hallel. We light candles. That is for the menorah lights. That's how Maimonides understands it. The other sages understand it. No, the other sages say that the Talmud is exclusively explaining Chanukah as about the lights. We don't celebrate. We don't commemorate the war, and that's what halacha says, that we don't celebrate. That's how halacha kind of sides with that other opinion that says that Chanukah is pretty much only about the lights and not about the war, which begs the question, what about the war?
Do we celebrate any war holiday?
Yes, Purim. Purim is a war holiday. Purim is we defeated the enemies.
How many people died in Purim? Yeah.
Sure, this is also defense.
But like saying how many people died in Purim, maybe that's why they're a little not the best.
Chanukah, this is no. Thousands and thousands and thousands. No, they did it again.
So we're bloodthirsty people who eat after a week.
I don't know, bloodthirsty, but no, it's these are all defensive situations.
Right.
But here's the point. The question really is the way halacha sides that Chanukah, there is no obligation to have a Suda because we really downplay the military. So that brings me back to my original question, which is why? Why are we downplaying the military victory when that seems like the major deal?
Because the minority of Jews were fighting that war.
That's okay. That's one answer. One answer is because who was fighting? It was only a minority of Jews.
And most of the Jews come to assimilation, etc. So it was not a victory; it was a loss. A net loss.
Okay, that's one answer. Another answer is what Toba said, which is that we're downplaying the Chashmonaim, the Hasmoneans, the Maccabees.
The fact that it was a minority.
Yeah.
Makes it all the more.
However, they also stand in infamy in Jewish history. Why?
That's related.
Correct. Why do they stand in infamy in Jewish history? Because they were Kohanim. Sorry, they were. He was a Kohen. And what happened later? I'm trying to now piece together. They did something. Yeah, something happened where they went corrupt or something.
Corrupt.
And so in history, there was, again, this is the theory. The theory is that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, some theory, he was onto the Mishnah, and I think they became like not only the physically, but the spiritual leaders. They put themselves in as the spiritual leaders, and there was conflict there. And so again, there's one theory that says that the author of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who was the one that originally organized Jewish thought into the various sections called the tractates, the Masechtas, right, of the Mishnah that then became the Talmud. So he omitted that because he didn't want to give a lot of play to these individuals that eventually their leadership went into different areas where they shouldn't have gone into, and also led to corruption. So there was a little bit of a downplaying of that. But I think I want to share another insight into this that I think also sheds some light, all puns intended, on Chanukah overall. And that is that Chanukah is really about a central theme. What is the theme of Chanukah? The theme of Chanukah is the notion of Mesirat Nefesh. What is Mesirat Nefesh? Mesirat Nefesh means self-sacrifice. Or, more precisely, the willingness to put yourself on the line for what you believe in. This is true of the war. This is also true of the oil. Let's break this down. What happened in the war? The war, as we just mentioned, there was a small minority of the Jewish people that were fighting to defend Yiddishkeit, Judaism. And they repelled the enemy, as we say in the prayers, 3 times a day, the addition, plus in the grace after meals on Chanukah, we say, Sarta Giborim Biyad Chaloshim, Rabim Biyad Ma'atim, that you, Hashem, you miraculously gave the many into the hands of the few and the mighty into the hands of the weak. We're calling ourselves few and weak. And yet, we won the military piece. Going into battle when you're outnumbered and outgunned seems like a fool's errand. It seems like you are walking yourself to the slaughter. And yet, the Chashmonaim, the Maccabees, did not let that deter them. And they went ahead full force. Why? Mesirat nefesh, self-sacrifice to defend our identity, to defend our religion. What happens after that victory is attained? So now you have the whole situation with the menorah, which brings up another question. And this is a question that not many people realize is a question, but it's a major question. The whole story over here, they only found 1 flask of oil that would have lasted for 1 day. They lit it, it lasted for 8 days. Why? Obviously, the answer is, well, they needed to light the menorah and they only had 1 flask of pure oil. Well, did you know that there's a halacha? There's a law in Jewish law that says that tuma hutra b'tzibur, that when the entire congregation is unholy, or not unholy, is tameh. How do you translate tameh? Is in a state of ritual impurity, or but in this case, in state of ritual impurity, which comes at the going to a battlefield and standing over corpses and all that stuff. So when the populace is in a state of ritual impurity, at that point, all bets are off. In other words, you don't have to observe the laws of ritual purity when the entire congregation is in a state of ritual impurity, which means, in very simple terms, that there was no problem halachically of using the impure oil for the menorah. Oh, the oil was impure. The Greeks had defiled it. They touched it. They broke the seals. Whatever. Great. But guess what? These are extenuating circumstances. That there's a law in halakha, Jewish law, that says under extenuating circumstances, there's no problem using things that otherwise are impure. In this case, the question is, why did they look for the pure oil to begin with? Why did they pour that in? What were they doing? Hoping for a miracle? You don't need a miracle. Use whatever you have. You with me on the question?
Yes.
It's a fundamental question that is based on a halacha that, again, is not that well known, but the halacha is the halacha. The law is the law. And it raises a fundamental problem or question with the entire story, which leads us to the following conclusion. Although they were 100% permitted to light the menorah with impure oil, without any question, it wasn't any less of what they exhibited, the same dedication and sacrifice. Okay, I don't mean that literally. It's not like they were putting their lives on the line to pour in this oil, but they were exhibiting the same super rational approach to the oil as they did in the military campaign. In other words, how does a person put their life on the line? How does that happen? It happens when you're not thinking in very linear and logical terms. Because thinking logically, a person would say, I'm not going to put my life on the line. Right? Why would I sacrifice my life? That makes no sense. Who would do that? You got to be crazy to put your life on the line. Unless there's certain things that are more important than intellectual calculations. When something is really important in a place beyond rationale, that's what evokes mesirat nefesh, self-sacrifice and dedication.
I think it's Yehudit, the Hashmonaim's daughter, was to be married and she was to be defiled by the Gentile, which is the matchstick to all of this. So her defilement is also tantamount to like October 7th for now.
Interesting. I was also thinking about this in the context of last week's Torah portion when Dinah is abducted and her two brothers go in, and Yaakov says, and their father says, "Why'd you do that? Why'd you kill everybody?" And they have the final word in that dialogue, and it ends with, "Should we allow our sister to be taken like that?" So it's interesting parallels in these weeks Torah portion, where you have almost Yaakov saying, "Well, what about, you can't do collective punishment. You can't. Yeah, it has to be." Jacob is saying it's got to be proportional, right? And the sons and his sons, her brothers are like, "Yeah, not happening." And we don't find that he pushes back on that. So it's interesting.
All it is your reputation. He didn't say you sinned.
But isn't that what this? Okay, this is a longer discussion, which we have to save for another time. So anyway,
Or every day like the eternal light.
yes, it was a 7-branch menorah, different than our 9-branch, 8+1. It was a 7-branch, all equal height. They lit it in the afternoon, not at nightfall. They lit it in the afternoon, and it lit. Sorry, there was enough oil to last overnight to the next morning, upon which every day in the temple, it was part of the service, daily ritual. And it burned out in the morning. The Kohen, as part of the morning rounds, would clean out the menorah. At some point, he would refill it, set it up, and then again in the afternoon, he would light it.
That's what our eternal light is in the.
Is that why we have the eternal light? It might be. I would have to look as to why we have that custom. Is that to commemorate the menorah? Maybe there was. Oh, interesting. You might be right. There was one of the lamps of the menorah. It was an oil lamp, right? 7 oil lamps. Stayed lit remained burning longer than overnight until it came time to rekindle in the afternoon. That was like the miracle light. Always something lit, and then he put it out, or then it went out, and then it was rekindled pretty much immediately. So there was one light that was, because there's 2 verses. One says you should light it me'erev ad boker, from evening to morning, and one says lahalot ner tamid, to be a constant flame. Ner tamid, there you go. Lahalot ner tamid. So the commentators say, well, was it evening to morning, or was it constant? Most of them burnt out. One of them stayed lit. The ner tamid, yeah.
In the same way they went full bore, very zealous because they were zealots, but they chose to be have faith versus shutting their logical mind down.
Correct. Yes.
We're going to have a tremendous. We're going to completely trust and jump, and then they found the pure oil, and then they used that because they said we need this, but then they also used it all.
Oh, so 1 second. I don't know that I'm going to get to that, but I do want.
Into 7.
There's different opinions as to what they did, though. But either way, according to the opinion that they poured it all in, they went all in. We'll just adopt that for the sake of today's conversation. So with the oil, and thanks for bringing me back to the point. So with the oil, the Jewish people exhibited essentially the same type of super rational approach. Doesn't make sense. You're allowed to use impure oil. Just be normal. Use the oil that you have. Stop being such an extremist, right? Just use what you have. It doesn't have to be such a big deal that you have to rely on a miracle. Who needs to rely on a miracle? Use whatever oil you have. It's fine. You're lighting the menorah after a disaster and devastation. You can use whatever you have. It's extenuating circumstances. God will be fine with whatever you have. And yet they searched, and then they found, and they felt that was a further miracle. And after they found, they lit it. And again, there's different opinions. Did they split it up into eighths and then, only pour an eighth in, or did they go all the way and pour it in? According to the latter opinion, they poured it all in. They went all in. And what were they relying on? They were relying on a miracle. They were going Mesirat Nefesh. They were going all in a way of super rational way, above logic, above rationale, without thinking about the path of least resistance. This was going all in, and their efforts were met with a tremendous miracle of the oil lasting for 8 days. This explains another phenomenon when it comes to Chanukah that's very unusual. Flip over the page, please, because the Talmud, the same Talmudic page also tells us how to light the menorah. Now, this is something that I think many of us are familiar with. Oh, here we go. Tony's asking a question. If the menorah predates the first Chanukah, then what was the purpose of the menorah before? Oh, excellent question. So the Bible, the Torah, speaks about the menorah as one of the items in the temple. Essentially, it was to provide light in the temple, and there were various lamps throughout the temple. It says that the menorah was not just to provide light inside, but the windows in that chamber where the menorah was, the windows actually projected outward, so as to project the light of the menorah to the outside world. It symbolized the idea of Judaism and Torah being a beacon of light to the entire world. So that was the symbolic nature of the menorah. The idea of, in God's temple, there was illumination that projected outward. The idea of, the core of our faith is to also affect, to be a light unto the nations, as it were.
Number 7.
7, excellent. Kabbalah speaks of that. We should probably do a Kabbalah class. Kabbalah says there's 7 primary personality traits. Don't make me pull out my Sphira chart again for the millionth time. So 7 Chesed. Yeah, what is that? The Chesed, Gevura, Tiferet. Now I have one, by the way, in case you Chesed, Gevura, Tiferet, Netzach, Yisod, Malchut. 7 primary emotional traits. And so it says in Kabbalah that the menorah was, we know in Halacha and Jewish law that the Torah says that the menorah was hammered out of a single piece of gold. It's not like they welded different pieces together. They started with a block, and they hammered out the candelabra from that block. And the message is that human beings have different personalities, but we're all hammered. We're all from the same spiritual DNA, right? I might approach Judaism with chesed. You might approach it with gvura, or I might be more netzach. You might be more hod, right? Different personalities. The point is, let's not look at each other as adversaries, but complementary teammates, hammered from the same piece of gold, from the same source, and serving the same purpose, which is to illuminate the world. So we come from the same place. We share the same purpose, right? The history and destiny are the same, but the way we go about it is different. I have my branch, you have your branch, right? It's like the joke of, the woman who walks into the post office this time of year, and she asks for Chanukah stamps, and they ask her, in what denomination? And she says, "Oy, even the postage has different denominations." All right, I'll take 12 conservative, 15 orthodox. All right. That's the joke. Classic joke. All right, back inside. Please turn the page, and I'm going to put this up as well on the Zoom. Okay, how to light. The Talmud continues. Now that we know that on Chanukah we light the menorah, well, how do you light the menorah? What is a menorah? What's the obligation? And again, I think many of you know this, but some of you might not know this, or many of you, and this is a bit of an eye-opening piece of Talmud. The sages taught in a Braita the basic mitzvah of Chanukah. Okay, there's going to be 3 levels of observing Chanukah. The basic mitzvah of Chanukah is each day to have a light kindled by a person, the head of the household, for himself and his household. Again, according to the basic mitzvah of Chanukah, you would light 1 candle each night. Night 1, 1. Night 2, 1. Night 3, 1. Night 4, do I need to keep on going? Probably not. 1 each night for the whole household, not for each person. Imagine you don't need a Chanukah. All you need is a candlestick, and you're good to go. 1 candle per night. That's it. That's the basic mitzvah.
Light it from a match, or you still have to leave it?
No, you light from match. Yeah.
Not from shamash.
Oh, the shamash we only have because since it's a mitzvah. No, it's a good question. No, it's a very good question. No, you're right. No, you're right. You would still have to have a shamash. Why? Because the light, the Chanukah light, is a mitzvah light, and you can't use it for a mundane purpose. So to make sure that we're not using that light for another purpose, we make sure to have another light that's not a mitzvah light, so that in case you're using the light, you could say it's not that light, it's that light.
Protecting ourselves from ourselves.
Protecting ourselves, literally from ourselves. Yes. All right. Second level, Mahadrin. And the Mahadrin, you know what Mahadrin is? We would call that the extremists. I'm kidding. Yeah. Mahadrin is like, if you're really all in, if you really want to go gung-ho Judaism, right? Those who are meticulous in the performance of mitzvot, they kindle second level, a light for each and every one in the household. So imagine you have a family of 4, let's say. So night 1 of Chanukah, how many lights are you lighting? 4. Well, forget the shamash for a second.
Said you have 4 kids, right?
No. Family of 4. So that's a total 4. So you would light first night 4, second night 4, good. Third night 4, fourth night 4. Every night you light 1 per member of the household. That's it. Second level. Level 1, 1 per night. Level 2, take the number of people in your household, divide it by 12. I'm kidding, right? Take the number of people in the household, light that number of candles per night. Now, you know the expression, what is that? Is that a bird? Do we have like a bird in the house? Huh? There is chirping, right? Wouldn't be the first time that I've taught Kabbalah classes with birds around. Somehow birds are mystical, I believe. Is it a speakerphone? There you go. Well, there goes my theory.
Okay, it is a bird and
It's a mystic. Yes, there are miracles happening around us. All right. So here's the deal.
Do we canonize miracles? We don't canonize miracles. We just make holidays out of it, right?
What do you mean by canonize? I don't know what that word is.
Well, when
Is it
Catholics, when some priest does a miracle and then there's witnesses and they have to go in, it's very political, but when they certify it's a miracle, then that person gets canonized.
Oh, the person becomes, we don't canonize people. Jews, we tear each other down. We don't canonize people. It's like that guy, I knew when he was a kid, that guy, right? That's how we, all right, back to the story. Mahadrim. Yeah, well, Mahadrim Mina Mahadrin. What's Mahadrim Mina Mahadrin? We would call that like the ultra orthodox extremists, right? Who are even more meticulous, adjust the number of lights daily. Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel disagree as to the nature of that adjustment. Obviously, there's a dispute, but there's something going on here. Beit Shammai say, by the way, the word Beit Shammai, the phrase means the house of Shammai or the academy of Shammai. Shammai and Hillel were 2 great sages that each had their own Torah academy. So the academy of Shammai say the following: on the first day, one kindles 8 lights, and from there on gradually decreases the number of lights until on the last day of Chanukah, he kindles 1 light. So imagine you have a Chanukah. Now we need to have 8 slots plus 1. So now we have the candelabra that we know and love as the Chanukah or the menorah or the Chanukah menorah. And so on day 1, you fill it up, all 8 candles plus a shamash, and you light. And then the next night, so night 1 is 8, night 2 is 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's the academy of Shammai. Spoiler alert, we do not do that. Beit Hillel say differently. On the first day, one kindles 1 light, and from there on gradually increases the number of lights until on the last day he kindles 8 lights. Beit Hillel says the opposite. You again need an 8 candle or 9 candelabrum, but you're lighting not 8 down to 1 up to 8, increasing. The Talmud continues to ask, what's the rationale? Why would Beit Shammai say go down and Beit Hillel say go up? And the Talmud has a dispute as to the grounds for that dispute. 2 different opinions as to why those 2 opinions disagree with each other. Again, if you're wondering why Jewish lawyers, it's because for thousands of years, this is how we've been thinking, right? Analyzing and then analyzing the analysis and then questioning the analysis and questioning further. That's literally the essence of Jewish study. But we're not going to get into that because that's going to take us too deep into this conversation. What I want to point out is the following. What I want to point out is that the way we observe the holiday, lighting night 1 of Chanukah 1, night 2 2, night 3 3, night 4 4, 5 6 7 8, that is Mahadrin min HaMahadrin. That is the most orthodox, observant, extreme, ultra, whatever word you want to use, way of doing the mitzvah. There is no other area of Jewish law that everybody does the most extreme. Doesn't happen. Doesn't exist.
Now everyone's lighting their own menorah.
Okay, fine. But there's no other mitzvah where it's become accepted Jewish practice to go the highest level. Usually, most people do the basic level, and then only the extremists, as it were, do the extreme level. When it comes to Chanukah, everybody does the extreme. I've never seen anybody. I've never seen it. Maybe I'm wrong, or maybe I've missed out on life. I've never seen anybody observe Chanukah by lighting one candle. I've never seen it. Oh, I don't have a menorah. I just have one candle plus one, right, with a shamash. I have one candle. I light one per night. Talmud says it's the mitzvah. It's the basic mitzvah, but no one does it. And the reason why, right? We can play up the question longer, but the reason why no one observes the mitzvah on the basic level is because there's nothing basic about Chanukah. Chanukah, the whole holiday is extremist. The whole holiday is beyond normal. The Maccabees fought when it didn't make sense. It wasn't normal. It didn't make sense. They were willing to give up their lives to fight for what they believed in. That's not rational. That's not basic. That's way beyond. The Jews, after achieving military victory, did not suffice with using the impure oil, even though that was halachic. That's kosher. It was kosher to use the defiled oil, but they didn't. They went extreme. And therefore, the way we observe the holiday, and when I say we, I mean every single person observing Chanukah is doing it the same way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, expanding in the light each night. Everyone does it extreme because Chanukah at its core is a holiday of, man, this is going to sound wrong, but extremism, not extremism in a negative way, but extraordinary, beyond the logical, beyond the rational, beyond the normal, magic, going above and beyond. If we didn't go above and beyond, we wouldn't have fought against an enemy that was stronger. If we didn't go above and beyond, we would have used the normal oil. Because they didn't, we also don't. It's a message in life also. People react the way you model, right? The energy that you bring into a situation is typically the energy that others pick up on. So when we're thinking about a holiday in which the actors involved in the holiday are giving it their all, how can we respond with anything else other than giving it our all? That's the whole theme of the holiday. Give it your all, even when it doesn't make sense, even when you don't have to. I don't have to light ascending candles each night. I can light one candle.
It's nothing off your back to light a candle.
I know that, but there's no other Jewish observance that everybody goes.
Because they don't know any different. We've been taught, here's your menorah, buy your candles, 44 in a package.
What I'm asking. Correct. Yes. No, you are right.
I always downplayed Hanukkah because Purim in my family was a little more celebrated. My mom's from Iran. But I felt like Hanukkah is just over the top because it's so close to Christmas. I mean, people are like, oh my God, you're gonna get all these gifts, you're gonna do all this stuff. And I'm like, no, we light our candles, we have family time. I mean,
well, you're right about the Americanization or the secularization of Chanukah, which is another conversation. But Chanukah has been a big deal for a while, and there's never been a recorded, I don't believe ever recorded observance of Chanukah, the basic. In other words, from year one, they were going all in. And the question is why. And again, this, at least the spiritual answer is because when the energy that's brought to the table is one of extraordinary or magical energy, if everyone feeds off of that and then responds in reciprocity in the same way. And so here is,
Well, to take off from what you said, it's no big deal and it's fun to light candles.
okay.
Okay, so that's what we mostly grow up with. Hanukkah is the miracle of the Lord. But the real miracle isn't the candles, which is easy. The real miracle is a sacrifice that the Maccabees made. Talk about Masir Nefesh.
Right.
I mean, they were going in and could have easily been killed.
Correct.
They fought on Shabbat, which brought in a whole other discussion.
Yeah, you are right.
We don't grow up with that.
Right.
Now, just the fact that they became corrupt later, which was probably generations later, so what?
You're saying shouldn't take away from that core. Good.
I don't understand.
Good.
All this is in the book of Maccabees, and I do not understand why it's not part of our.
Good. Excellent question. Some answer that the reason why Chanukah is 8 days instead of 7, because think about it, if the oil was anyway going to last for 1 day, that means there's only 7 days of the miracle, not 8 days, right? It burned for 8 days, but 1 day was natural, 7 days was miraculous. So why do we celebrate Chanukah for 8 days? Just do it for 7. If you're celebrating the miracle, you only have 7 miracle days. So some people say that the first day of Chanukah is celebrating the military victory, like Purim is 1 day. So Chanukah is 1 day for the military victory, plus 7 for the miracle of the oil. Now, the question is, do we teach that? And I would agree with you. That's not played up. We're all into the thing. Some say that the sages wanted to be sure at that time in history because it was a few hundred years before the temple's destruction. Think about it this way. The story of Purim happens in between the first and second temples. And after that story of Purim, not that many years later, the second temple was built and Jews enjoyed 420 years with the second temple. This story happens about, I don't know, a century or two before the second temple's destruction. At that point, Jews are exiled, and we've been exiled for the last 1900 plus years. And so maybe some argue that the sages wanted to make sure that it doesn't become a holiday all about nationalism and fighting for, fighting physical wars at a time when we don't necessarily have that luxury of fighting physical wars. We're fighting for a spiritual survival. So let's reframe the holiday or frame the holiday as being about a spiritual victory. Again, there's all these theories. Correct. And that's so 70 years or 48. So 80, 75 years. That's been a very unique and new thing. Fighting in our homeland for our homeland is a novelty in Jewish history. I say novelty in Jewish history. I mean, it's a novelty of this last exile. It's in the last very small piece of it. I'm not downplaying it. I'm saying that for the bulk of this 1900 years, we have needed to fight spiritually for our survival and not necessarily military wars on the ground. So the question as to why we don't play up the military stuff, could be explained on pragmatic grounds. Again, I'm not justifying. I'm just saying it might be explained upon pragmatic grounds. It's a good question. Question that remains. Yes. Yeah. So, well, also no, but 8 days. So there's two answers, and the practical answer is, that what?
You have separate holidays.
Right.
7 days.
Right. So go to 7 plus Simchat Torah. So you do have this idea of 8 being symbolic of infinity and the same theme that we're speaking of, the super rational and the supernatural. 7 is symbolic of nature as symbolized by the natural order of creation. God created the world in 7 days, of course, 6 days plus Shabbat, but the cycle is 7. 8 represents 7 plus 1, which is the supernatural. 8 is also, turn it sideways, it's infinity. So even in, I don't know, math, numbers, whatever, 8 is symbolic of that which goes above and beyond. So this holiday is about going above and beyond. And that takes us perfectly into the segue for today's conversation inside. I want to make sure to read this. It's a very short piece, but we're going to read it inside and hopefully tie the pieces together of our Kabbalistic conversation and the Kabbalah conversation and the Chanukah conversation. Okay, here we go. I'm going to pull this up on the screen as well. Let's see where it is. Okay. Oh, so I have to apologize. For our online text, I'm missing the second page that we're going to study today, but I have the first page up. So you'll have to trust me that I'm not making up the words of the second page. Okay, here we go. We're going to jump inside because our text also talks about going above and beyond. And I was thinking, we don't servant and master today. I think is a bit of a that construct evokes a lot of mixed feelings and negative, I would say, negative connotations of feelings. But I was thinking how, given certainly today's what's going on today in Israel, we can supplant servant for soldier. I mean, just think about a soldier. If you want to think about a servant, and just to kind of reframe or contextualize this conversation, this text is going through different types of relationships that we might have with God. One relationship is like a child to a parent, where the child loves the parent, the child thinks like the parent, the child loves what the parent loves, the child is excited to do what the parent wants the child to do, and is dedicated to the parents' desires even more than they're dedicated to themselves. And we've joked, oh, where are these children? Fine, now that's been the joke, but that's the paradigm is a child's love, natural love for the parent is driving that relationship and driving that type of not only affinity, but also action. And then there's another model, and that's the model that we're starting to present today, which is the servant model. And again, you can think of it as the soldier model. The idea that I'm not excited, I'm not like, it's not like, it's not something that I'm looking to, but something that I know I have to do. And something that is very important, and therefore I'm dedicated to doing it, heart and soul, with mesirat nefesh, with self-sacrifice. I'm dedicated to it, but it's a different type of relationship. Let's continue. There is, however, another level, referred to as the dimension of servant. This dimension also exists within the souls of Israel and stems from their bodies, as in the verse where the children of Israel are servants to me. In other words, from the soul, from our soul, we are children. From our bodies, servants. The soul is on board completely. The body needs a little bit more coercion, as it were. Elbow grease to get it on board. This dimension is like the work of a servant for his master. Servitude consists of kabbalat ol, accepting a yoke, which means I am just accepting this is what I need to do, and that's it. In other words, the servant has no desire to labor and does it only because of the heavy yoke that is placed upon him, out of the fear of the master, which compels him to perform difficult and very burdensome tasks, even though they are very much at variance with his strength and desire, etc. The labor weighs so heavily upon him to the point that he is short of breath and soul. Even at night, he cannot sleep and rest. He cannot rest and sleep because of this yoke. A yoke of iron compelling him to because this yoke, a yoke of iron, compelling him to labor, weighs down upon him, such as to awaken him from his minimal amount of sleep to go work, and it does not allow him to regain his spirit at all. He's talking about a situation where this is, in another context, you would never choose this, but it's almost like this has been chosen for you. This is now your calling. This is now your task, and this task is so heavy, is so important, that you can't sleep, that you wake up and you have to get back to the task, back to this thing. Now, again, in the context of servitude, I would say this, we would all say, this is not healthy. This is horrible. Let's abolish this. I get that. He's trying to describe a paradigm where a person feels an obligation towards something. Again, it's not something they would naturally pick, all things being equal. They wouldn't say, oh, this is what I want to do. But in extenuating circumstances, that's why I'm thinking of a soldier. There are certain things that are bigger than you, certain things that are more important than your comfort, than your sleep. This is something that you know is very important, and therefore you embrace it. And yet, as he says right here, the servant, despite the hardship, the servant accepts this labor because of the master's yoke. Even though the labor goes against his desire, it becomes second nature to him to carry this yoke and load, this great burden of difficult labor. Again, we're now out on the online version, so I'll just pull my picture up. Just as the bull becomes accustomed to the yoke and the donkey to the load, and this submission is acquired by the servant like second nature, literally. In other words, it becomes like teva, becomes nature. It becomes like second nature. It becomes habit, and the servant becomes accustomed to this. All of this is because by submitting himself as a servant, that he gives away himself as a servant, he becomes nullified to the core as if he were not an independent being at all. And his entire purpose in the world is only to work for and serve his master. He's considered like the property and acquisition of his master, literally. And he therefore accepts upon himself all types of most difficult and strenuous tasks and does not question it at all. For so it should be in Yiddish. That's exactly how it should be. For this is, in the Yiddish, what does it say? Atazeh darf sein. That's the way it needs to be. For this is his entire being and purpose, only work and service. And therefore, it is literally like second nature to him to carry the yoke and the load, etc. Now, such a servant certainly has no joy or personal pleasure at all in his work with a harsh yoke such as this. Nevertheless, the fact that his master's will is fulfilled as a result of all the trouble of his work This is his entire vitality and being. For it is for this that he was created and formed, and he has nothing independent of this. For he has no place nor independent being at all, since he is pierced, and his soul, body, and all that is his is acquired by his master, such that even when he acquires or finds or gains, all belongs to his master, as is known. Now, again, this sounds very harsh, but I was thinking in the context of Chanukah, obviously, that's the way we started this conversation, the context of the Maccabees. These are individuals who they were not in it for themselves or for personal glory. They were not in it for personal gain. This is not something that they were excited about doing, but something that they felt that they had to do. Those are two different realities. It's not like, oh, I want to be a Maccabee one day. No, there's a situation happening. There are values that I have in my life, my spiritual values, and therefore I must do this. I feel like I have to do this. And in that moment of submission, I'm giving myself over to a greater cause, to a master that's beyond myself, at that point, there is that bittul, that nullification, that it doesn't matter what happens to me. It doesn't matter my fate, because the only thing that matters is my task and my mission and getting this done. And that's what we mean by mesirat nefesh, giving up one's soul. It doesn't only mean giving up one's life, it means mesirat haratzon, giving up one's will, submitting one's will to a higher authority. It means that I'm no longer living my life for myself. I'm no longer living my personal life where I wake up in the morning and I do what I want. I am now living my life completely focused on a higher mission, a higher task, a higher calling, a higher will. That is the entirety of my life and my focus. This is the way he describes the servant persona. This is the way we can imagine the Maccabee persona to be. This is what drove them to light the menorah, the temple menorah, with light that could only last for one day, because that is the divine will. Even when the divine will says that you could use impure oil, at that point, it's in a state where we're not thinking about self, not thinking about loopholes or ways to get out or the easy way out. This is going all in, dedicated to the greater task. So in the final analysis, what we've learned today is that there are really two forms, building off of what we discussed in the previous sessions. There's two primary forms of divine service, like a ben or like an eved, like a child or like a servant. The child form of divine service is you love it. You're excited about it. I can't wait to do it. God wants it and I love it and I'm excited. I want to do it. And there's certain mitzvot that I would imagine you are a child in that relationship. There's certain mitzvot where I imagine you're excited about doing it. And maybe it's Chanukah. Maybe you love Chanukah. Or maybe you love another holiday or another mitzvah. You can't wait to do it. You feel excited about it. You know it's what God wants also, but you're personally excited about it. But then I would venture to say there's some mitzvot that you're like the servant, hopefully, right? Where you wouldn't have chosen this. It doesn't make sense to you. You're not really that, naturally, you're not really that interested in it. But you know that this is the divine will. And like a soldier, you show up and you do it. And you do it because it's not about you. You're surrendering to a higher authority. You're surrendering to the general call, was the highest general call. Commander-in-chief. Or not. Admiral, whatever. You're surrendering to the top. And if God says, I want this, the child says, yes, I'm excited. The servant says, the soldier says, yes, I'll do it. Pushing away personal desires, pushing away personal comfort, and saying, this is what's needed of me. This is important. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to surrender, submit to a higher authority, and I'm going to do what needs to be done. Yeah, you know what? We would all love to be in that childlike relationship in all of our responsibilities in life. Wouldn't we all love to love the things that we need to do? That would be amazing. Imagine all of our responsibilities, going to work, right? Parenting, relationships, spirituality. Imagine if you loved every part of your life. But we know that life is not simple. We know that in life, there are certain things that you love, certain things that you don't in the moment love, and yet must get done. Why? Because they must. And being a servant means that you have the ability to do something out of your immediate comfort zone because you know it must get done. That's what a servant is. As important as it is to exercise the son persona, the child persona, it's equally, if not more important, to exercise the servant persona. When I read it, I know it sounded extreme and harsh. I know it. I try to start off with the Maccabees. The whole opening was about the Maccabees. So at least we know we're not the only extremists here, right? They were also extremists. And we also observe the holiday in extreme fashion to this very day by lighting, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But here's the big idea. The big idea is that in life, and everyone knows this, there are certain days that you wake up excited about your responsibilities, and other days you wake up and you're not so excited. And the test of life is, right? The core of life is not how you perform when you're excited to perform, but how do you perform when you're not so excited to perform? That's the difference between good and great. It's easy, right? It's easy to be kind when you feel kind. It's much harder to be kind when you feel like you're in a lousy mood. If you can step up and do it then, that is spectacular. That's what it means to go above and beyond, to be a servant, to be a soldier, to be dedicated to the mission. Would it be great to love everything all the time, to love art? Yes. Is that realistic? I'm going to posit no. For most of us, the answer is no. And yet, if we can show up with our best foot forward, putting our best foot forward in every situation, even those we're not so excited about, that truly defines an extraordinary character. Someone who is not just limited to their own immediate mood, but someone who also has the ability to surrender to the moment and to be present when the need arises. And so this is my message and my blessing for all of us for this Chanukah. Let us take the Mesirat Nefesh, the self-sacrifice, the dedication, the surrender of the Maccabees. Right, Tobo? We're reclaiming the Maccabees today. I'm only doing this to make you happy. I'm kidding. taking also the Maccabees, right? Taking the dedication of the Maccabees and ingraining that in our own lives. How can I in my life be a little bit more dedicated to something that I'm not so excited naturally to do, but I know is the right thing to do? That's a very long meditation and sentence, but I hope it makes sense. So my blessing for all of us is to love the things that we love, to do the things that we must do, and to not let our own seichel, our own rationale get in the way of what is right. Thank you for joining me for this special Chanukah edition of Kabbalah Cafe. Wishing all of us blessings of light and joy and peace and good health and healing.
Amen.
Let us say Amen. Thank you for joining. Thank you.
How about lighting the candles? Isn't celebrating the miracle of the 8 days of life? Isn't that also celebrating and being special people that actually live that?
Yes. Yes, that's a great point. We are. Right. Tell your neighbor. It's a good idea. I like that idea. All right, good.
The thing is,
The main thing was their faith. Like, we really talk about the faith of the Maccabees. We do. And
We do. We do in the Valenisan prayer.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you. In the Valenisan prayer, we mention the military stuff. But when lighting the menorah, there's no mention of that.
But not the military stuff.
You're saying their courage.
Against the strong.
Yeah.
We talk about that.
Yeah.
Just like
You can't have a miracle if you don't fight. If you don't show up, miracles are not going to happen. Like entering into that fray, that might be the biggest miracle of a person saying, you know what, it doesn't make sense. I'm going to do it anyway. And that's really the takeaway message. Are we only willing to do the things that we've made sense of, that, oh, this makes sense so I can do it? Or are we willing to do the things that we don't necessarily have an exit plan, but we know has to get done? We don't know how it's going to end, but we gotta get it. And I think that's the point of today's class. Really, to me, the message I try to convey, hopefully it came out, is to stretch ourselves a little bit. The ability, because being a child of God as a word, that persona is, you're very comfortable, which there's nothing wrong with being comfortable. We should always be, halavai, we should be comfortable. But the servant persona is someone who is able to stretch outside their comfort zone and say, you know what, this is not so comfortable, but I know it's right. So I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to not be limited by, see you guys, not be limited by my comfort and break outside of that. Why? Because this is what's needed, or this is what's right. That's a powerful thing for a human being to be able to have that surrender. It sounds when I read this, I hear the cringe. I hear the like, are we really like this?
You're not reading the next chapter.
Like a servant? Well, no, that's another persona. We have the third persona. But I'm saying is in the modern Western mind, American mind, this servant, oof, no way, horrible. Someone call the authorities. Someone is submitting to someone. What is this? Who does that? It's horrible, right? Yeah, it's about me. I have to feel good about this. What do you mean? You know how much therapy I'm going to need from being a servant? This is going to be terrible. How am I going to recover from this? Sounds like abuse. Good. Or you can say abuse. First of all, I would say no one's forcing the servant. I think he did say that. But the point, except no, but even then, is God really forcing? I mean, when was the last time God put a gun to our heads? Right? It's not happening. The point is that a person is recognizing a higher authority and saying, I am ready to surrender my own, comfort zone, my own whatever I'm excited about today, or I'm not excited about today. I'm going to do what needs to be done. And I think, again, that's what differentiates, certainly in relationships, between good and great, right? It's easy to be kind when you feel kind. It's easy to be nice when you feel nice. It's easy to be happy when you feel happy. But it's harder to do that even if you don't. That's the key.
So, Rabbi, I have a question.
Yeah. Correct. Yes. Correct. It's okay to feel the tension. I'm going to just reword that a little bit. It's okay to feel the tension. The tension reminds us that we're servants, we're not sons in this area. There are plenty of mitzvahs, let's speak spiritually or Jewishly. There are plenty of mitzvahs that we're excited to do, no problem. Again, lighting the Chanukah menorah, someone said this, it's easy to do. Who doesn't like lighting candles or lights? I'm with you. In that area, if that's you, then you're a child of God in that area where you're excited about what the parent wants to do. Great. And then there's some mitzvot, maybe lighting candles Friday night before sundown, or maybe wrapping tefillin in the morning, whatever the mitzvah is. I'm going for the two most famous ones, but whatever that mitzvah is, there might be mitzvot that are way more difficult. To do that one, you will feel the burn. The burn means the tension, and that means that you're giving up for this. It means that in that area, it's a servant. It's a powerful thing. I've said this before. I didn't mention it today. But when it comes to parenting, there's different techniques. But one technique is to acknowledge the difficulty for the child. Let's say you tell a child, about certain behavior. One way is to acknowledge the challenge of doing that behavior and saying, I know you would like to do X, Y, and Z, but this is the right thing to do. And I know that you have the ability to do the right thing, even though you don't want to do. And that's really the acknowledgement. It's not saying that you should love doing it, because not in every area will you always love that. It's powerful to know that you could not love it and still do it anyway. That's powerful, to know that you can transcend your personal, Dr. Max.
So my question is how do you have the discernment to know, say in Kabbalistic terms, when you should be more toward Kesed versus Gevurah? In other words, maybe I need to be setting a limit as opposed to being almost boundarylessness,
right,
present with kindness. I mean, when do you set a limit? When do you not? How do you develop that discernment so that you know that you are doing that right thing and you are sacrificing for the right reason and not sacrificing for some other reason that maybe at the end of the day really wasn't a sacrifice you should have been making. Or the other way around, a kindness that you gave that you shouldn't have given.
Yes, excellent question. That's a very difficult question, right? How do we know when we are surrendering to something higher versus kind of following maybe a path of least resistance? Takes me back to what I think we discussed last week about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who on his deathbed said, I'm not sure which direction I'm going to go. Right? Am I going to go to heaven or the opposite? And we asked the question, how could he not know where he's going to go? He was like the greatest of the greats. How did he not know? And so I gave one answer then that said he wasn't sure if when he served God, if he was really serving God or serving himself. In other words, was he following the path of least resistance for him personally? And that happened to align with some good stuff, but it was really about him as opposed to the larger picture. And I think you're asking a very good question. That's a very difficult question to answer. And it may only be possible to answer within oneself, which presents another challenge is how do we know that we're not stuck in ourselves? But it's very hard for, I think, to answer that question, purely objectively. And kind of I don't know that there's a rule of thumb to answer that question. I think it's all context-based. And the individual themselves is usually the most primed to know that or to figure that out, or to, for lack of a better term, to pray on that and to try to get some, divine guidance as to what is the right what is the right path of service, a chesed approach or a gvura approach right now in my life. Like, is this now a time for chesed or gevura or netzach or hod or whatever it is, which is the service and which is the service of, or the avoda of a child, the avoda of a servant, right? Am I to follow my natural inclination, or am I to surrender my natural inclination because there's a greater will over here? And that, we're kind of laying out different paths, but a specific path in a specific context is going to be obviously. Now, and I know what it sounds like I'm saying. What it sounds like I'm saying is, well, this is all in theory. In practice, who knows? But what I am saying is that in practice, it requires some specific analysis. And I would say it's always good just following, the advice of the Hasidic masters to have an outside party, an objective party to consult with on specifics, and as to a path of avoda. But in general, I think, based on the proximity of these conversations in this text that we're studying, first it mentions the child, then it mentions the servant. Usually, if it's about positivity, then if it's positive, if it's a positive experience, that's a holy experience. If secondarily, the second option, which is the idea of breaking oneself and surrendering to a higher authority to do something outside one's comfort zone, that is certainly a valid path and certainly a necessary path, which I think in the proximity here would be a second path in divine service. But again, how that ranks specifically would be a harder question to answer, as a general rule. Hope that makes sense.
Thank you.
Sure. Until what? Right. So maybe in retrospect to have some clarity in retrospect, right? Which is good in retrospect, but not necessarily good when going through, all right. Yeah, it's harder, right? It's harder to find it. But I think in general, it's good to know that we have, like today's point, to know that we do have the ability to override our, our more self-oriented sensibilities and to go above and beyond.
But you also take, along the way, other people would say things to you and pat you on the back for doing what you're doing, which helps you continue.
You're saying the feedback that you get helps you be that servant, be that soldier on the way. Yeah, correct.
A good way to be that zealot, get into that zealot mindset where you're getting out of your conscious thought. Because really, if we try to solve problems with intellectual problems with thoughts, we're just circling, recircling,
spinning wheels.
Yeah, we're just spinning. So I think when the miracle happens, in my personal opinion, is when I get out of my thought and just trust and just stop fighting everything and just move forward to where I'm being told. And then I, equate that to, if you're ever, you jump off a high dive or off a cliff and it looks really scary because it is. And, the only way to jump is to turn off your brain. And it's kind of crazy because you're feeling like
Interesting.
you're actually doing something crazy. But when you turn off your brain, you can count to 1, 2, 3, jump, and say, I'm just gonna jump, and just let my body.
That's it, and that's probably a very practical example, right? I don't know if you guys could hear online, but Yaakov was saying that, if you're on a high cliff or diving board and it's time to jump, you can't think. You have to just say 1, 2, 3, jump. And that's that's a perfect example of what the servant persona is. I'm stuck in my head. I'm not sure. I'm not so excited about it. 1, 2, 3, jump. That's it. I know I need to jump. I'm just gonna jump. Is that surrender? Yeah. Is that necessary sometimes? Absolutely. All right, we'll close it out because I know people have to go. Dr. Maxey, good to see you. Thank you for the sponsorship, special dedication. Mariana, great to see you. I saw you before, and it's great to have you here. Class on Chanukah, and Fran and Dror, perhaps as well. Good to see you guys live from Vegas. We call Vegas Mitzvah City. I know other people have different names for it. We call it Mitzvah City. Mitzvah City. So many opportunities. I officiated a wedding in Vegas. I went dressed up as Elvis. Okay. But I did officiate a wedding in a casino hotel with a racetrack in the basement. Yeah. It had this casino hotel had an actual indoor horses. It had a horse racing racetrack. Oh, I said racetrack, right? It could be cars. No, a horse racing track in the lowest floor. Actually, it was Marnene's kid. Anyway, I ended off the chuppah by saying, and now we'll ask our chatan, our groom, to break the glass. I said just one thing: don't step on my blue suede shoes. That was literally how I concluded the. I could not help myself. I did that line. I threw in a few lines in the chuppah. Yeah, absolutely. But that was like the final word before I was done. I was definitely going to make an Elvis reference. All right, we'll see you guys. Happy Chanukah, everybody. See you guys.